Welcome to the screencast, Integrating Evidence into Your Writing. Part 1, Maintaining Your Writer's Voice. This is a graduate writing workshop from the University of Saskatchewan. My name is Heather McQuinney, and I'm Graduate Writing Help Specialist here at the university. I'd first like to go over the learning outcomes. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to integrate evidence from your sources into your writing to support your claims and points. And while you're integrating the evidence, maintain your own writer's voice. Here's what we're going to do in the presentation. First, we'll define what we mean by integration. Then we'll discuss the importance of the writer's voice. After that, we'll identify problems with integration in student paragraphs. And finally, we'll look at some solutions to these problems. So what do we mean by integrating? To integrate means to combine two or more things so that they become a whole. And what do we mean by integrating evidence into our writing? Well, we mean incorporating evidence into our paper from sources to support our claims and points. And what do we mean by sources? Well, they are the places where the evidence we find is published. Sources, of course, are usually academic journal articles or academic books, but they may also include other documents such as government publications. And a hard thing in academic writing is to integrate evidence while maintaining your own writer's voice. And there are particular parts of paragraphs where your voice should be heard more strongly than others. And one of these key parts of the paragraph is the topic sentence. Usually the first sentence that announces the point of the paragraph. And then the final or wrap-up sentence. Again, your voice should come through strongly in this final sentence. Your voice should also be heard in signal words. These are words that are used to guide your readers through the paragraph. Examples are first, second, one reason, a second reason, similarly, conversely, but, however, and there are many more signal words that you can use. And generally, you should avoid beginning paragraphs with a quotation or a paraphrase. Why? Because you want to begin paragraphs with your own voice, not with somebody else's. And there are several problems that students have when integrating evidence into their papers. The first problem is the paragraph begins with the evidence. And of course, the paragraph should begin with a claim or point. And then the evidence should be used to back up this claim or point. The second problem is the paragraph fails to attribute ideas to a source or contains misleading citations. So the reader isn't sure which ideas are the student writers and which come from another source. A third problem is that the paragraph sometimes fails to make connections among studies with signal or linking words. And actually, see part 2 of this presentation for details about signal words. And the fourth problem occurs when the paragraph fails to conclude with a wrap-up sentence that links the evidence to the claim made in the topic sentence or to the paper's overall claim or argument. Now we're going to look at some examples of student writing, student paragraphs that display some of these problems. So here's the first student paragraph. So as I read it, think about the integration in this paragraph. How successful is it? Some educational programs have embedded Indigenous language immersion into the curriculum. Declining trends are being offset to a degree by the fact that Aboriginal languages are being learned as second languages. 3 communities in northern Saskatchewan, Onion Lake First Nation, the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, and the Peter Ballantine Cree First Nation, have successfully developed and implemented their own immersion programs. In the Northwest Territories, the Dene CADE curriculum includes the teaching of Dene to students. So, what about the integration in this paragraph? Well, you probably noticed that the quotation takes over the paragraph pretty quickly. There's an attempt at a topic sentence here, and then all of a sudden we're right into the quotation, and it doesn't finish till the very end of the paragraph. So there isn't much of the student writer's voice in this paragraph. She's given her voice over to the Cisco et al., over to their words. And this is what you want to avoid. You want to avoid letting somebody else take over the narrative, take over your writing. And you also want to make sure that if you do use a quotation, that you comment on the quotation, that you don't want to let the quotation, let the author of the quotation have the final word. And so notice there's no wrap-up sentence in this paragraph, nor are there any signal words to guide the reader through the paragraph. Let's look then how the student ended up revising the paragraph. And I think you'll agree that the integration is improved. I'll just read the paragraph, but first of all, I want you to notice that red is the topic sentence, blue is the evidence, green is the wrap-up sentence, and purple the signal words. So let's just go through how she revised it. To help young people form a connection to their culture, some educational programs have embedded Indigenous language immersion into the curriculum. For example, several First Nations in northern Saskatchewan, Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, Lac La Ronge Indian Band, and Onion Lake Indian Band, have implemented successful Cree immersion programs. In another example, the Dene CADE First Nation in the Northwest Territories is teaching cultural experiences in Dene. These First Nations have recognized the importance of language in maintaining culture and have therefore made language a key part of their Aboriginal education programs. So you can see then that the integration is much better in this paragraph. The topic sentence is a little bit more complete. She gives a reason for why these educational programs have been implemented. And then she guides the reader through the paragraph with signal phrases, for example, and in another example. And she's decided to paraphrase instead of quote, which is a good idea because there's no good reason for quoting here. In fact, we talk more about quoting in part 2 of this presentation. So she's paraphrased, and then she also has a wrap-up sentence where she's so the wrap-up sentence here at the end, it gives a sort of closure to the paragraph. It frames the evidence. The evidence is framed with the topic sentence and the wrap-up or summary sentence. And so there's a sense, you can hear the student's writer's voice coming throughout the paragraph now. Now, I have another example here from an engineering paper. So I'll read it out and then we'll discuss the integration in this paragraph. Subone et al. Investigated the oxygen permeation of DLC deposited on semicrystalline PET, polyethylene and polypropylene polymers and amorphous PMMA polymer. The gas barrier property of DLC-coated samples dramatically improved after DLC deposition. The gas barrier property of fractured DLC on mechanically deformed substrates has been measured. The substrates with more cracks and higher residual strain, such as PET, had less damage to the gas barrier. Kodama et al. Fabricated high gas barrier carbon films on PET substrate. The gas barrier of the coated films was 23 times stronger than the barriers of the uncoated PET substrates. Well, here you can see there isn't very much integration. Let's look at the topic sentence here. Well, notice that the topic sentence is about Subone's research, and yet the paragraph doesn't just talk about Subone's research. Kodama et al.'s research is also referred to. So this topic sentence is inadequate. It needs to be more general in order to be an umbrella sentence for the whole paragraph. Then there really are no signal words leading the reader through the paragraph. And then at some point, we're not sure if we're still talking about Soubone's research. So sort of in the middle here, there are no more references, no more citations, no more footnotes. And so we don't know quite whose research is being talked about in the middle. And then we suddenly have Kodama's research introduced here. And then we assume that the last sentence is about Kodama's research, but there's no wrap-up sentence. So again, there's not a strong voice coming through in this paragraph. This is how the student improved it. Several researchers have investigated the gas barrier properties of different polymers using DLC coding. Soubon et al. Investigated the oxygen permeation of DLC deposited on semicrystalline PET, polyethylene, and polypropylene polymers, an amorphous polymer. The authors reported that after DLC deposition, the gas barrier property of DLC-coated samples dramatically improved. Soubon et al. Also measured the gas barrier of fractured DLC on mechanically deformed substrates. They found that the substrates with more cracks and higher residual strain, such as PET, exhibited less damage to the gas barrier. In related research, Kodama et al. Fabricated the high gas barrier carbon films on PET substrate. These studies suggest that DLC deposition can improve the gas barrier of certain polymers, particularly PET. Well, you can see here that the integration is much better. Start with an umbrella sentence, gone up a level in generality. Then we bring in Soubon as evidence, and we talk about Soubon et al.'s research. And just so the reader is still understands we're talking about Soubon et al.'s research, we start the next sentence here with the authors, and then we come back to the next sentence, Soubon et al., and then they found. So I consider all of these really signaling to the reader that we're still talking about Soubon, which is why I put them as signal words. It's the way in which the student writer is leading the reader through the paragraph, reminding the reader that we're still talking about Soubon et al.'s research. And then when the student wants to switch to somebody else's research, to Kodama et al.'s research, he uses in related research. So we have a signal or linking word here for the reader. And then we have a wrap-up sentence that comments on the topic or the evidence in the paragraph, and we have a signal, what I would consider signal word, these studies, referring to the studies in the paragraph. Very successful from a weak paragraph to a very successful, well-integrated paragraph. Other problems occur, as we've said, because of inadequate citing. And so what happens is students often have trouble knowing where to position citations. And incorrect positioning can confuse your reader about the origins of the claims made and ideas discussed in your paper. And I think we just saw that in the last example. Students also often don't know how often to cite the same source more than once in the same paragraph. This can lead to excessive citing, which can distract the reader. Remember, though, it's better to overcite than to undercite. So let's look at this paragraph and decide what the citing suggests about the origin of ideas. Since the early 1970s, deaths in Canada from automobile accidents have dramatically declined. Richards et al. Studied Canadian traffic accident statistics from 1970 to 2010 and discovered more than a threefold decrease in deaths during this period. This reduction can be attributed to lower speed limits as well as to safety features now standard in cars, including seat belts, airbags, anti-lock brakes, and a third rear brake light. However, traffic safety is once again being threatened, this time by drivers' prolific use of the cell phone. This claim is borne out by recent Statistics Canada figures that shows that deaths and injuries in Canada caused by distracted drivers increased by 15% from 2010 to 2015. Although overall deaths from traffic accidents have declined, this new threat to safety must be taken seriously. So what you might have noticed here is that we start with a topic sentence. First sentence is a topic sentence, the student writer's own claim. The second sentence then supports the claim of the student writer, evidence to support that claim. And then some of the third sentence, it seems as if the student writer is making another claim about the reduction. And then the sentence starting with, however, the same thing, the student is making another claim. So because of the citing, we can assume then that we're no longer talking about Richards, and we're talking about the student's own claim. Now here's the same passage, but written a little bit differently. The first two sentences are the same. And then the student writer says, the authors attributed this reduction to lower speed limits as well as to safety features now standard in cars, including seat belts, airbags, anti-lock brakes, and a third brake light. However, the authors argue that traffic safety is once again being threatened, this time by drivers' prolific use of the cell phone. And the rest of the paragraph is the same. The point being here is now we have a different sense of the origin of ideas because of the citing. Now we can assume that the points made in the third sentence and the fourth sentence are still Richards. These are Richards et al.'s claims. So I wanted to just show you the difference here, and you have to be careful with the citing that the reader knows whether he or she's reading about your ideas or about somebody else's ideas. Here are some reporting verbs and signal words that you can use to signal to your readers that you're continuing to refer to evidence from a source. The authors, they go on to suggest, maintain, etc. The authors further suggest, etc. The authors, or they also suggest. Additionally, the authors suggest. In addition to suggesting X, Y, and Z, the authors also suggest something else. The authors conclude. So these are ways that you can indicate to your readers that they're still reading about authors' ideas rather than your own ideas or claims. So to sum up, maintain your own authorial or writer's voice. Assign your sources a supporting role. Focus on the construction of your argument and use your sources as evidence for your own claims and points. And watch for the following problems: not integrating the evidence into your paragraph, beginning the paragraphs with evidence from sources instead of your own claim or point, and not using citations effectively to distinguish between your own points and those of your sources. Part 2 of this presentation on integrating your evidence will deal with quotations, and you'll receive more details on signal words and reporting verbs.